Okay, well, thanks very much, Cameron, for introducing the program. It's been a fantastic program since we started back in last December, and it's still going. And on Thursday, Cameron and I are up in Burnie working with Cluster 4 up there. What I thought I'd like to do is just give you a bit of an overview of the cluster program and how it's structured, and give you an idea of the number of companies and individuals that have been involved. And then we're going to talk to 4 of the participants. But first of all, as Cameron said, it's a 25-hour program, 12 hours of workshops, 11 hours on-job exercise and a couple of hours coaching at the end. The way in which we structured it, we weren't necessarily wanting to enrol individuals, we wanted to enrol a company because this is actually about a company dealing with the ageing workforce challenges, although I can pretty much guarantee that within most groups a lot of individuals were dealing with their own ageing workforce, ageing in the workplace challenges. What they came out with was a mature age workforce strategy, certificate and logo. So if they completed the program, they got a certificate and they also got a logo that they could use on their collateral. So the first workshop we looked at really was the wake-up call around the world's changing. So we were looking at demographics, both globally, Australian, Tasmanian, having a look at some of the myths that are out there and stereotypes around ageing and ageing workforces. And then they went away and did 2 exercises. One was to look at their workforce profile and their policies and practices, and some are going to talk about their findings. Then we came back for the second workshop, which was really focused on becoming an age-friendly employer and business, where we talked about what is it that older workers are looking for in the workplace, what do good policies look like, but more importantly, what are the practices that actually make a difference for people. They then went away and did probably 2 of the most powerful exercises that we've found through doing these clusters. And one was to actually go out and talk to 6 older workers in your own workplace and talk to them about what's important to them, what would have them want to stay on at work, what would have them tip out, what are some of the things that are worrying them as they think about the next stage in their life. But an innovation that we've brought in here in Tasmania, because we've run this program previously in South East Queensland, was to actually go out and talk to 6 older people in the community and find out what sort of products and services they were looking for. And out of that have dropped some really interesting ideas. And the third session was really bringing it together in terms of strategy and action plan, and then the follow-up coaching. So the plan that every person has ended up with in various forms, some are typed, some are scribbled, some are illegible, and they change all the time. But the important thing is really the thinking process was a really, really clear message around what we know about the ageing of our workforce, what your business risks are and getting sharp and focused on those, what your strategies are and what the action plans are. So this is whoops, where am I? Gone too far. That is a delay. That's a list of the companies that have been involved, so 28 organisations, 50 individuals. What I'd like to now do is talk with 4 of the participants, and I could have chosen any of those organisations because each have got their own story. But I really wanted to pick some across a range of clusters that illustrate some of the points that we want to make. So as you saw, one of the first things that they did was in actual fact get their story together. So that what I called it the elevator pitch, so within 3 minutes you could pitch to your chief executive on the challenges that your organisation's got around the ageing of the workforce. So Pam, from WorkSafe, you and Cameron were part of one of the clusters, and you had a look at your workforce profile, you had a look at your policies, and you talked with a number of the staff in WorkSafe itself. What did you find?
The main points, WorkSafe...
Can you hear Pam?
Oh yes, we'll use this. The WorkSafe Tasmania has a staff of around 100. We found that 30 odd staff were over 55, another 36 between 45 and 55, so very similar to most of the other organisations that we worked with, definitely an ageing workforce. We had lots of fairly friendly policies in terms of allowing people to have flexible working hours, taking extra leave. There wasn't a great awareness of those policies though. A lot of people just didn't know about it. I followed up with a survey of around 16 of our older workers over 50, and the main feedback from that group was that they hoped to remain in the workplace. They wanted to remain active and be involved with training and pretty much be treated just like everybody else, not to be treated as perhaps people who were considering leaving in the short term, that they just wanted to continue on with their working life and be an active part, be valued, and continue on as they had for most of their lives. So that was the sort of feedback I got.
So just to follow up on a couple of things there, you said that you had the policies but the practices weren't that well known. What were some of the policy or practice things that the older workers were looking for that would be important to them?
Oh, flexibility was the main thing, being able to cut back on working hours and be more involved with family and other things, but at the same time remain an active and valued member of WorkSafe Tasmania.
So one of the questions that you had when you went out and talked to those older workers was around what were some of the things that would have you tip out of the workplace or say, I'm out of here. What came through for you there?
Yeah, I think the main fear was being left out of the picture. So the isolation and not remaining as and being treated as fairly as everybody else. So I think that was a perception that keep ringing through, that they very much felt that because of their age, they perhaps would not be treated the same as other people.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so Pene from Kingborough Council, you brought along one of your colleagues with you who looks after outside workers. Your story may be different to WorkSafe's or may be the same, but one of the things that we wanted you to do, and most organisations did, was looked at their data, looked at their story, and then what are our business risks? What were some of the risks that you identified?
Okay. So our workforce is fairly typical in local government. 95 workers out of a headcount of 220 are over the age of 50.
Yep.
And they are concentrated in certain areas. And one of those areas obviously is our operational workforce, our plant and machinery operators, who are also predominantly male.
Yep.
So you tend to find local government, as I'm sure you're aware, tends to be very gender-specific roles around community services or plant and machinery operators. But we also have a very mature workforce as well.
Okay, so amongst that outside workforce, what were some of the risks that you saw?
Well, obviously, our staff on the outdoor workforce are still doing fairly heavy physical work. It's still quite manual in nature. So one of our discussions was around early intervention strategies for manual handling. And it obviously makes good sense, not just for our older workforce, but our entire workforce. And one area that we've been doing some work on is with our reserves crew, our parks and reserves crew, and what we call our cutter crew. And our cutter crew are the staff out there who swing those brush cutters out 8 hours a day. It's very intense, very manual work, and we have had a number of injuries from that type of work. So we've looked at a number of different strategies. We're hiring in an all-terrain remote control mower. She's a fairly big beast, and it just takes a man or a person on the end of a sort of little black box to actually move it.
That certainly cuts down the swinging
it certainly
and the
does,
physical
yeah.
work.
But there's a whole range of strategies, and we're working our way through that at the moment.
So one of the things that we are finding more and more with ageing workforces is often there's an ergonomic solution to some of the issues. That's an ergonomic solution.
Yes, that's an ergonomic solution.
What other solutions have you found to some of the challenges that you're seeing?
Okay. So we have decided that we're going to become, use I guess, our more mature workforce in mentoring roles.
Yep.
So we are trying to balance our workforce by having a group of trainees coming through, and we're going to be looking at giving our more mature workers the opportunity to do training and mentoring so that they can pass that knowledge on. So we have 5 people in our workforce, our outdoor workforce, who are celebrating 30 years of service this year. So you can imagine that they know where every manhole and every drain and the history of every road in the municipality, and so part of that knowledge transfer is being able to pass that on.
I guess because one of the things I work with a number of councils that you find, and particularly you don't necessarily look after water, but with utilities too, is that the pipes never go where the maps say they go.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So these guys would know the workarounds, and that's the knowledge that can only be passed on through conversation really, rather than documenting.
That's right. I mean, it is important to document, and we have a whole program attached to that as well. But it's also about those skills about being in the workforce and what the work involves, and it's dealing with our residents, because they're the guys out there on the front line in the orange shirts with Kingborough Council proudly across their work shirts. So it's a lot about dealing with our community as well.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I find from working with councils, and I've worked with a number here and in Queensland, is that your workers are also members of your community. And it's absolutely critically important that you deal with them well, that you respect them and you value them, because they're going to remain members of your community. And you want them to be positive towards the council as an employer.
Oh, that's right. I'd say the majority of our workforce, lives within a 20 to 30 kilometre radius of our work, yeah.
Yeah. So Christine at the far end, Christine Benbow from RACT and David Blaine, and some of you may have heard David at a recent Better Work Tasmania breakfast talk about his perspective. So we thought we'd have Christine this time. So Christine, is often a pattern to the types of risks that we see identified now through companies. What were some of the risks that you identified for RACT, and maybe then we'll talk a little about some of the strategies you're thinking about.
Sure. Yeah, and it was interesting talking to the other people who were involved in the cluster that everybody had the same patterns to a certain extent, depending on the nature of their business, of course. But we obviously have an ageing workforce as well, but one of our major concerns is the lack of knowledge and experience that we will lose as a company when our ageing workforce do retire. And we realised we didn't know. We didn't understand when they were going to retire, what they were hoping to achieve, did they want to retire at all? And we found that was quite a constant pattern across all the different areas. Our patrolmen obviously hold all the knowledge of our mechanical side. Our travel consultants hold all the experience. They've been everywhere, they've done everything. And we didn't know when these people were actually going to leave us.
So what are you thinking in terms of strategies? And I know we're meeting later in the week to talk a bit about that, but what's your thinking at this stage for you and David?
Yeah, it became quite a shock, and it was across all our different business units that we didn't know much about these people. We started speaking to them, and they wanted to talk to us and wanted to share their stories and open up about what their fears and concerns were about working to an older age, and also then the retirement factor. So we've instigated a number of workshops across our business in all the business units, and we're just going to have some conversations and talk about their needs. And we're finding that just opening up and talking about what apparently was an elephant in the room is becoming quite powerful. Our concern, obviously, as a business, is if we don't address these issues, some of our risks is that we will lose credibility with our membership base, that we will lose profitability, and that we won't be able to retain members of our service organisations. So we've had a look at what we can do as far as keeping, as Penny was saying, keeping our senior staff in to do mentoring roles. So both whilst they're still working with us and afterwards. One of the big projects we'll be working on is an alumni group where we can keep the connection and the conversations happening with our senior staff once they have retired. A big pattern, a big fear right across all the companies is that loss of connection once someone retires, and the loss of that social network that they have at work. So we're hoping to keep that going even after people have retired.
Okay, thanks very much, Christine. Rob Douglas came on the first cluster we ran, which was with the building construction industry. And Rob, I guess why I've got you here is that one of the things that became apparent from working with you, and particularly with you within the group, was that the whole issue of business succession was a major issue for a lot of small businesses. You've got that tapped, you've got some good thinking, you've got some good things in place. But the reason I wanted you here this morning was you had something of an epiphany on the way through, and that was about the population structure of Tasmania and what that meant for your business. Do you want to tell us about the business insight you got as a CEO?
Certainly. For me, my average workforce is only in the mid-30s, so the age of them wasn't an issue at the moment, apart from for succession planning in the future. But the epiphany for me was that was our customer base. Our customer base is ageing, so we've got to make sure that we match the skill sets of our people with the needs of our customer base. And that came down to a number of different things, including marketing, the way that we communicate with our customers, the way that we deal with our customers, things like teaching customers how to use our products, using the right technologies that they can relate to. Some of our products can be quite complicated and sophisticated, so giving a 95-year-old a mobile phone, they may not know how to use the internet, but they should be able to make a phone call. Being aware of what their needs are and matching their needs to our business so that we can offer the right products at the right time in the right way.
So, Rob, what have you done since the cluster in terms of, I guess, becoming a much more of an age-friendly business?
Initially, we changed our marketing, so now we tend to market in mediums that we wouldn't have used before. For example, we're advertising for the first time in the senior magazine. We wouldn't have done that before. We would have thought that that's not our market, that's not where our customer base is. But that's not correct at all. We'd been incorrectly targeting our market. Also, we're changing the message in our marketing so that it's aimed more at their needs, the things that that they can relate to. For example, older people getting up chopping firewood. That's hard work as you get older. So having a solution for that. So basically, changing our messages and our marketing was the biggest thing. We've started recording videos that we can give to people that can explain how to use products and what they should expect and how to maintain a product, because we think that the audio-visual will give them a lot more information than just reading it in a technical manual. So those sorts of things.
Okay, so really, and we can't talk much longer, so for each of you, there's actually been significant insights that have come out of the cluster that have been related to your business, but there's a pattern that sits across there. Now, there's some others from the clusters who are in the room. Would you just like to stand up if you're here and you've been in a cluster? So we've got Julie, Ken. Yep. Okay, great. All right, well, look, thanks very much. And I'm going to be around for the rest of the conference. Some of these guys are going to be quite happy to talk with you about the program. And Cameron's going to have some flyers. And what we're looking at doing is getting another couple of clusters going in July. And looking for another 8 to 10 organisations who really want to take this seriously and walk the path that these guys have walked also. So, Pene, thanks very much. Rob, Pam and Christine. Thanks.
Thank you, Geoff, and thank you for hearing those different perspectives from Tasmanian workplaces and what they're getting out of these sorts of programs. So as you can see, there's certainly some powerful learnings that are coming through. I guess the ageing workforce has been an issue, not only in work health and safety, but right across workforce development, and that's the reason that the two topics have come together for the conference. So we've got work health and safety, skills and workforce development have coming together, and that's a really good example of how they can complement each other. Just to let you know as well, Geoff Pearman has, in the last, probably week or two, has released a new book, Life and Work After 50, Doing It Differently. So that's available at the AIM booth throughout the two-day conference. So feel free to come and have a chat to Geoff afterwards, or go and order yourself a copy, or you've got copies here, or yep, there you go. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what is a very important topic.